Sort of good morning piece while everybody joins. We'll give it a couple of minutes for people to start arriving into the room. This is morning to Lisa.
Hi, morning, Amelia.
Lisa's got the most fabulous view behind her for us all to look at this morning.
I've also got two slightly whingy dogs in my office today. Well, one
whingy. We should introduce the dogs, I think, because they're going to introduce themselves, aren't they, at some point, I think.
Yeah, I apologise now if one of them is a bit grumbly this morning.
No worries. We're like a dog to people. So yeah, morning everybody. Welcome. Just give it another couple of minutes for the tech to start working and everybody to join. We're talking today about how charities can support their employees around menopause awareness. It's obviously Menopause Awareness Month. So welcome. Hi, Alison. Welcome. Okay, so I think that means that we are in the room. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this event this morning around how charities can support their employees around menopause awareness. I'll do a quick intro and a bit of a hello this morning from charity people who are hosting this event. And I'll hand over to Lisa to say hello in a second as well. Before I formally introduce Lisa, I just want to say how excited I am to be talking about this today in public. It feels like a really big deal, actually, to be live on this topic. It's the first time I've ever talked outwardly about women's health. And just to set the scene a little bit, I helped set up a women's forum at Charity People a couple of years ago, because I was taking some time off with polycystic ovaries and making up a whole sort of fake migraine story around why I was doing that. And in talking to female colleagues about what I was going through, lo and behold, a number of them had very, very similar issues, whether it was endometriosis, PCOS, perimenopause, going into menopause. And we talked internally as a group of women and discovered that pretty much everybody had some sort of story around women's health that they were either keeping hidden or something that had happened to them that they'd had to deal with. So it felt really powerful to share in that group, but it still felt a bit separate. A little bit like women in a room talking to other women. So that's why I'm buzzing to have Lisa here this morning and to be actually having a conversation out loud in public live. And just to sort of intro Lisa and say hello to Lisa this morning, we met at a Pride in Leadership launch event, and I don't think I've ever told you this, Lisa, but I was suffering a little bit from social anxiety before we went to the event, and you just came straight up and said hello, and you were so friendly, and it was like the start of me feeling like myself again, actually. So I just wanted to say thanks for that, because I don't think I wouldn't have told you at the time, but it was just such a big help to be networking and for somebody to come up and say hello. So we got talking, we had a really good chat. Lisa told me about what she does, and I was totally fascinated, so we talked a lot. So Lisa, can you tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, sure. And what I will say, Amelia, is networking events are not easy for anybody. And trust me, it is hard at a networking event, and you just have to dive in. And it was lovely to meet you, and I'm glad I helped in some way.
You were just so friendly, and it was just the first person I saw when I walked in, and it just set the scene for the whole rest of the event, feeling really comfortable. So yeah, thanks.
Pleasure. It's good. Great to know. So if I just introduce myself, my name is Lisa Wright. I established a business earlier this year called Menopause the Right Way. And I do a couple of things. I work with private clients in terms of exercise, nutrition, diet, but the primary focus is around education and training for organizations around becoming menopause friendly organizations, and also sort of providing education and training for their employees in terms of direct impact of menopause and perimenopause symptoms. I've had an interesting journey to get to this point. I don't My background was I spent 20 years as the MD of a data company, which is not how you would kind of imagine somebody now talking about menopause would come from. But in 2019, I went back to do a master's in exercise and nutrition science at University of Chester. And I chose to do my dissertation on the impact of the menopause on endurance athletes. And that's how I got really interested and in the menopause and its impact upon everybody. And I went and did some further menopause qualifications. And I've got a really whiny little dog here, so I apologise now if you can hear her. But it was a very interesting journey, and I'm absolutely passionate now about all things to do with menopause. And one thing that I'm really, really passionate about is helping younger women understand the perimenopausal journey, and also trying to break the stereotype that perimenopause and menopause is something that just happens to women aged 45 to 55, because there are lots of other scenarios where individuals and women can go through perimenopause symptoms. So that's something I'm also really passionate about.
Thanks, Lisa. So just to let everybody know how this sort of morning is going to work, we're going to ask Lisa some questions and get some information around why menopause is a universal topic and it's not for women, and a little bit about the impact excuse me, that menopause has on businesses. But we are open for questions. So if anybody wants to pop questions, comments, thoughts in the chat box, we'll get to them at the end and have a few minutes for sort of questions from everybody that's listening. Lisa, can you tell us why this is a universal topic and why it's not just women focused?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a couple of reasons, Amelia, in terms of why everybody should be going on a journey of menopause awareness. Firstly, if we look at the demographics around women per se, at the moment, the World Bank did a study earlier this year and identified that we have about 51% of the UK population is women. So we are the majority just. But when we look at women within the workplace, at the moment, UK PLC, for want of a better expression, employs about 15.5 million women, of which 9.8 million are aged between 35 and over 50. So if we look at the demographics, that is the exact age that, you know, on average, women can go through the perimenopause as young as 36. The average age of perimenopause is 47 and the average age of menopause is 51. So when you look at the sheer numbers, organisations from a demographic standpoint, you know, have to acknowledge that a large proportion of the working population of women are going to be experiencing perimenopause or are menopausal. So that's the first reason, but I think it's really important that organisations recognise and try to become menopause supportive and friendly. The second reason is, and it goes back to what I said earlier, it's not just women in their sort of late 40s, early 50s. You mentioned, you know, what your issues around polycystic ovaries, but you've got endometriosis, you've got early menopause, you've got medical, you've got surgical menopause, and these are, none of us know what health issues we're going to have in life. But, you know, I have a friend of mine whose granddaughter was 21, diagnosed with bone cancer. Christie's were fantastic in terms of telling her, you know, the prognosis, the diagnosis, the treatment, helping her freeze her eggs. But what they didn't tell her was that the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy she would have would put her into premature menopause at 21. So there are plenty of scenarios that can bring on perimenopause or menopause symptoms that aren't related to being in your late 40s or your early 50s. We also have the trans community and the non-binary community. You know, there's a lot of hormones that are being taken by trans individuals to help them transition. And again, you know, if you're sat there as a senior manager within an organisation and you're just thinking that perimenopause is applicable to that one group of women, and I'm actually going to strangle my dog very shortly.
I think the dog feels passionately as we do about this.
Yeah. I think she's perimenopausal. She's of that age. She's about 8 now. It's hormonal. So yeah, so from my standpoint, it isn't just your middle-aged women. It could be your younger members of staff who are transitioning or are non-binary. It could be younger members of staff that have had some kind of medical or surgically induced menopause. So that is why I'm passionate about getting that out there and in front of organisations.
So in terms of businesses and employers, what is the impact on them in terms of this as an issue?
Well, obviously the range of symptoms that people can experience will differ significantly. And, some individuals may get off very lightly and have minimal symptoms that they kind of breeze through, and their perimenopause is over in a relatively short period of time. My own wife's perimenopause was over in about 6 months, and she got away, relatively lightly in terms of symptoms. But so far, from the women that I've talked to and the individuals that I've talked to, the people who suffer minimal symptoms tend to be in the minority, not the majority. So those symptoms can have a massive impact upon your ability to do your job. If you're awake 5 or 6 times a night, having to deal with night sweats and changing your bedding and changing your sleeping clothes, it is going to be difficult to get up in the morning and feel normal and like you can do a normal day's work. So there is plenty of evidence that symptoms are impacting upon women's ability to do their work and to carry on as normal. So if you think about that organisationally, if you've got increased absences because women and individuals are having to take time off to manage the symptoms, that's workload that either doesn't get done or has to be spread amongst other members of your team. So in terms of sort of knock-on effect for other employees, you've got that as the first issue. If those absences are not being explained by the individual, as you yourself mentioned, you use the cover of migraines, then there may come a point when the organisation looks to implement disciplinary procedures. Now, that has a knock-on effect on the employee in that the employee may choose to self-terminate rather than talk about why their absences have increased or their ability to do their job has been affected. Or they may not discuss it at all and actually get taken down the disciplinary procedure and ultimately terminated. The end result is that the organisation potentially is losing, an individual who may well have a lot of organisational experience as well as a lot of life experience. And when you look at the actual costs to an organisation to replace an individual, I think in 2014, Oxford Economics did a study and they identified that replacing an employee costs the employer around £30,000. And that's not just a senior team member, that's maybe a middle manager or an administrator. So you look at the recruitment costs, you look at the time costs of the individuals involved interviewing, and then you look at the 6 to 9 months that it takes the replacement employee to get back up to
speed. And embed,
yeah. So from an organizational standpoint, if you don't become a menopause-friendly, menopause-supportive organization and you lose these experienced, long-serving women because they don't want to discuss their symptoms and they sort of self-select out of the organization, you're losing good talent, talent attrition, and also talent retention. And also in terms of attracting new talent, who's going to want to go to an organisation that doesn't have an open and inclusive culture?
So what can organisations do to be more menopause friendly?
There's some practical stuff and there's some sort of policy orientated stuff. Yeah. And for me, it starts at the top. You have to have your senior leadership team look at menopause supportiveness as part of the health and well-being. So we've dealt with disability in the organisation, we've dealt with LGBTQ, we've dealt with mental health. And for me, menopause comes under that category of EDI and employee health and wellness. So it has to come from the top. The The organisation then can put in sort of procedural type policies like a menopause, a formalised menopause policy, menopause support in terms of a menopause champion, menopause events, signposting really good menopause resources, and then obviously menopause training for managers and for the employees themselves. But in terms of practical stuff that the organisation can do, that could be things as simple as, allowing employees to contact HR and putting into place flexible working on an as needed basis, or allowing employees to come and request desk fans if it's difficult to control the office temperature centrally, putting sanitary products in the ladies' toilets. Relatively ineffective relatively cost light actions that the organisation can do that can help it go along that path of,
it also acts as a signal, doesn't it? So it seems like a small thing, but it's a signal to people that we can talk about this stuff, that it's out in the open, that we are aware that this is an issue for women and that it's okay for us to kind of talk about it. I wonder, Lisa, if you could tell us a little bit about why this doesn't need to be a difficult conversation and how we can open that up for people.
Yeah, I mean, from a demographic standpoint, Amelia, we're going to have to get over the issue of this being a difficult conversation, because the numbers don't lie in terms of the numbers of women employed who are going through perimenopause as we speak, or who are menopausal. So the demographics are going to force the issue. But, in terms of what else we have to consider, as I say, open and inclusive organisations have been proven to be more successful longer term. So if we move to becoming an open organisation and encouraging our employees to have that conversation, the next thing we need to do is to support our employees to be able to feel comfortable having those conversations. So that might be training of not just your senior leadership people, but training of your managers, because menopause fits into the category of a potentially difficult conversation, which managers have to have about all sorts of things. So you need to sort of educate and train your managers, and you also need to sort of educate and train your HR professionals as well, because they can very often be the first point of call for the employee, and they provide support for the line managers as well in terms of having those sort of less comfortable conversations. But, it also comes down to looking at and wanting to have a duty of care for your employees. So, making your employees feel important, and that as an organisation and as an employer, you do actually care about their health and well-being.
Absolutely. We're going to close off fairly soon. So if anybody does have any burning questions, feel free to pop them in the comments. But Lisa, I wonder if people want to we will provide, by the way, alongside the video, some links to awareness raising tools and some links to get in touch with Lisa if you want to. But if somebody was wanting to do one thing today to kind of support menopause awareness, either as an individual or an organisation, what would you recommend, Lisa, as a takeaway?
Okay, so as an individual, the first thing I would recommend is be aware of all of the symptoms, because there are up to 42 different symptoms. And if you feel you're starting with symptoms, track them. Use something like the Balance app from Newsom Health to track your symptoms, because that will actually help you build a picture. And if you choose to go and have medical intervention and medical support from your GP, you've got the evidence. So that's the first thing I would do as an individual. I'd raise my awareness of what the range of symptoms are, and I'd start tracking them if I felt I was suffering from them. From an employer's standpoint, the first thing I would do is say, if you haven't started on your menopause journey as an organisation, you need to start that journey, and you need to start that at a senior level so that you can push that culture and encourage that culture throughout the business. And that starts with education and training. So, start thinking about the impact of the demographics on your workforce and look to start that journey of becoming menopause friendly and a menopause supported employer.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Lisa. If people want to get in touch with you, we'll put your contact details as a sort of comment for kind of any awareness training that you might need within your organisation. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and thanks so much for your time, Lisa. It's been lovely to see that friendly face again.
No, it's a pleasure, Amelia. I'll hope to see you at the next Pride in Leadership event because I'm signed up for it. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely rest of the day, and don't forget to keep on this one. I'm presuming